So today we have Nwachu, and he graduated with a degree in applied psychology, then went on to get an advanced degree from UB in industrial and organizational psychology. He teaches, not here, but he teaches, and he's a serial entrepreneur. So he's done this many times before. This you feel was your most successful so far. So he's going to focus on things you need to consider if you're going to start a social venture. And this is really important, and more of our students are interested in starting social ventures. I just met one right now who's about to launch one. So this is great. So welcome again, and Jay, thank you for being willing to spend time with us. We welcome you to campus.
Thank you. Absolutely. Appreciate it. Good afternoon again, everyone. It's afternoon, right? Yes.
Sure.
Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it. So just a high-level introduction of myself and why I'm here and why I care about this particular topic. So as you mentioned, I am an alum of UMBC, and for the folks who remembered my time at UMBC, I just saw Jen Dress pop in a little earlier, and a couple of folks around campus. You could probably say I was one of the nice troublemakers as a student, because I'm just one of those folks who's naturally wired to find problems to solve, right? And sometimes problems can look like, there is no social life on this campus. I have to throw parties, right? We went from that all the way to things in student leadership. And a lot of what I do now in the field of social entrepreneurship, I can say kind of found some of its roots here. Always been in me as a person, but UMBC gave me like a place, like it was contained to do a lot of it. So I encourage you all to, take every opportunity to be on campus to get involved and, get your hands dirty a little bit and really form the ideas that will shape your own future as well. So, oddly enough, yes, I finished UMBC with a psychology degree, but I actually came in as a computer engineering major and a math minor, and went all the way to junior year after going through physics and all the math classes and Calc 3 and all of it, and I was putting AND gates and OR gates together, and I said to myself, this can't be life, all right? And I remember having a meltdown my third year with my Nigerian parents who were wondering what the heck I was going through, and what I actually wanted to do was change my major to business. But we didn't have a business degree, so you guys are pretty lucky to actually have this conversation. So psychology was the closest thing I could find. It was the study of people, hence why I took it into the industrial lens for my master's degree. I share that again because, by the end of this, I want to come back to this notion of like agency, doing things you love, and making something of it is really, really important. Because after I left UMBC, did the whole graduate school thing, I spent the first part of my career actually in the field of talent acquisition, helping to recruit people to go work for major corporations, federal government, nonprofits across the area. I actually did a 2-year stint with the Choice Program here on campus, helping to recruit staff for the Choice Program. And one thing I experienced throughout that entire time in that career was the ability to help other people figure out their career goals, but not necessarily looking at mine and what really drove me. And ultimately where I got to was this idea around social entrepreneurship, which we're going to talk about today, is really the fact that not everyone has the opportunity that we have to get out of college and go get a job or pick what we choose. There are folks out there who are really, really struggling, and often entrepreneurship really is the only choice that they have to do something, right? And there are folks like yourself who might be sitting in this room where social entrepreneurship is one of the ways you can do something. And you have choice, right? And if you're gonna make that choice, understand how hard it is and how serious it is. Because often when you put the word social in front of it, somebody else's life is at stake at that point. But you're truly intentional about that, right? Yeah, nobody on Facebook really cares at the end of the day how much we're connected to people. They wanna sell ads, right? That's not social entrepreneurship. Social venture says you're starting with a social problem that you wanna solve. You're gonna take a business approach to solve that problem. But by doing that, you step into this realm of caring for other people. And it's a pretty serious topic. So I start that by leaving it on the table and saying, when we go into this, there's a certain level of weight here in the decision that's being made when you go in this direction. All through my career, I also dabbled in a couple of other things around entrepreneurship. When I was a recruiter, I started with Being Employable to help people that were coming out of the 2008 financial crisis to get back into the workforce. A lot of resume reviewing, career coaching, all for free. And then I realized if I start charging money, I would have to take my ticket really, really seriously, so I stopped it because I didn't want to charge money, right? We'll talk about the balance of finance and meaning in a second. And then in 2016, I realized I wanted to get out of my first career and shift into this body of work really around social entrepreneurship, because I saw a really, really big opportunity for where society was headed and how this could be a power for good, right? So I'm gonna infuse my experiences along the way, but today we really just came here to hear about what are the things I should be thinking about if I wanna go down this road. And this could be an entire course by itself. I'm just gonna put that out there, right? It's a lot. And I'm gonna try to do as much as I can in the next 35 minutes or so to give you all opportunity to ask questions. And I should say that my style of teaching is more experiential in nature, so I might turn the question back on you at sometimes and just make you think out loud. And also, if you have questions along the way, raise your hand. Don't wait till the end, because I talk for a living and you may never get the opportunity. Just want to put that out there right now. All right? Raise your hand. Just want to put that out there. All right, let me just start this notion around social entrepreneurship. So I'm going to start with this graphic here, this social buzz. There's a lot of social words floating around society today, right? Everyone wants to launch a social venture, wants to be a social entrepreneur. There's social innovation and there's social impact, and there's social is a social soup, quite frankly. And I think it's a good thing. I think your generation sees a lot of good in society and our future, and you are using your voice to force issues that some folks just took for granted, right? And this field is gonna keep growing the more you push. But I do wanna call out some of the things just to ground yourself in. I start with this notion around social innovation, right? The way I understand it, the way I interpret it is this. Innovation, obviously, is the idea of bringing something new to an old thing, to solve a problem, right? So when I look at social innovation, I think about how do we use new creative ideas to address a societal problem, whether small or large, right? It's just this concept. And then I shift over to social entrepreneurship. I see that more as a mindset of actually saying, I'm gonna choose to live this way or do something this way. And the social entrepreneurship mindset doesn't necessarily mean you have to go start a social venture. It just means carrying that mindset as you're a student leader on this campus. It means when you're out in community and you're serving, taking that mindset with you. The idea that we can bring new thinking to old problems, right? And you're gonna go out and practice it in a number of different variety of ways. When we step into this realm, and I can interchangeably use social enterprise, we talk social enterprise at where I work, and social venture, really the same thing for me, right? When we step into this third realm, for me, this is where it gets really serious. It means I am committing, right, a considerable amount of time to launch something that I'm going to define, right? It's not volunteer anymore, right? It's not, I may wake up tomorrow and just do it, and maybe tomorrow I won't do it. It's okay, right? It's not that. It's I'm going to be intentional about putting a body of work around something that I'm going to then go out into the world and say, you can hold me accountable to this. That is where it gets serious. So we're gonna spend our time talking more about this, but recognize the foundation it's been built on, all right? And there are some folks who may work for a social enterprise who don't particularly care about social entrepreneurship. They just wanna do finance and get paid for it. The meaning, it's nice, just pay them well and they'll do the finance job anyway, right? But there are some folks who are just wired this way. I like to think I'm wired this way. I drive up Gridiron Avenue in the city and I keep hitting potholes. So I can think about is what solution can I find for these potholes? Goodness gracious, right? That's just how my mind works. And some people, if you're wired this way, it's a gift and a curse. You just gotta figure out something to do with it, all right? But here is where we get a little serious, all right? So let me just jump into what is actually a social enterprise. And this is not how you come up with this, by the way. This is like a whole practice. We start with the idea that if you're gonna go out and design and launch something you're gonna call a social venture or social enterprise, you wanna first start with what impact am I trying to have on society? What is the thing that I want at the end of the day? It's what's going to shift in society as a result of what I do. In traditional entrepreneurship, you start with maybe a different question. What can I do to make a bunch of money as fast as possible, right? And then you go find the solution right? But the primary driver is to attain wealth. Here, the primary driver is to do as much good as possible. And you start with that question. And often it starts with boiling down to a single problem. And we'll talk about that in a second. And then I'm going to insert one here. I should probably do a better job with this one. Then we think about what is the best business model or the business approach to solving that problem. Often we think about solving social problems. Some folks would say, well, start a nonprofit, right? And some folks are like, well, I want to solve a social problem, but I also want to make money, so maybe it's not a nonprofit, maybe it's a for-profit. And that's when we start getting lost, because often it's not really, this is a legal designation. The question often is, what's the best business model to achieve the most amount of impact? And it could be a hybrid, it could be a nonprofit, it could be a for-profit, don't really care. It's all about maximizing impact and the best way to do that. Because often we're going to get caught up in this notion around the business model of what is the product I'm going to produce? What is the service I'm going to provide? And often we get lost in those nuances and those details, right? We get wedded to the idea that we came in with and we're not looking to look beyond that. But if we keep going back to the primary driver, it's impact. And impact has to do with what other people experience, not me. Then it just then begs the question, if I'm going to go down this lane, am I willing to bend and shift as much as possible to drive at that impact? Because it's about them and not me. And then we come to this piece around financial sustainability. This is where I draw a distinct difference between what a traditional historic nonprofit would look like and a social enterprise in the truest sense would look like. The social enterprise says at the end of the day, the checkbook has to balance too, right? It's different from the traditional nonprofits who just goes out every day and says, write grants all day long, right? And that's primarily how we're gonna get grant funded, or how we're gonna survive, is grant funded. Because the limitation there is you're applying for grants every year. And if you don't get that grant, what's at stake? This. Financial sustainability suggests that you have to think very creatively in how to keep this thing alive for the benefit of the people you're trying to serve. And sometimes it may mean selling a product. Sometimes it may mean charging for something as much as you don't want to. Even the person who's going to get the impact, maybe it's charging them something. Because if that's what's going to keep this thing alive, then maybe that's what you must do. So financial sustainability becomes very, very critical. And there are a lot of different ways to look at blended finance and how we approach this. I just want to call it out because this, quite frankly, is where most good ideas go to die. It's a lack of bold thinking around how we're going to survive financially. And I say that as somebody who runs an organization right now that is all grant funded. And I wake up every day thinking about it. If another recession hits, now the grant funders start, the market. What happens to this? I have to worry about that every single day. And the last part is really, really important. Reinvestment. The idea of going to a social enterprise, social venture, once again, is not to maximize profit for you or revenue for you or your paycheck. I would argue the idea is to compensate yourself fairly, compensate your staff fairly. But if you do see more profit and more revenue, you have to have a strategy for how to reinvest it into the model. Because ultimately, that's how you improve impact, right? It's not Southwest. Let's just ignore the problem with our systems for a long time until the bubble's up and it blows, right? That's a business. Minimize cost at all times to maximize profit at all times without caring for the impact on the customer until the very last minute. That's traditional business. Social enterprise says, when we do see profit and we do see revenue, we can reinvest. And then takes away that stigma of, how are you gonna be a social enterprise and like try to make all this money with the money it's going right back in? You don't have to worry about that anymore, right? I want to move a lot faster through this, but I wanted to ground us in this as a model concept. All right. So one of the first things we think about in the idea of launching any business, social or not, is this idea of finding a problem solution fit. Right? It's the most important thing. Is there a problem you're trying to solve for? And can you identify solutions that will help solve that problem in a way that is measurable and help drive impact? This is probably one of the most adaptive challenges for a social enterprise, because problems often are so interconnected. It is hard to drill down to this one singular problem, right? A cell phone charger solves a singular problem. Keep your cell phone powered. When you're dealing with people's lives, therefore the social venture, lives are complicated, and it is hard to pick the one problem and stick with it. So often we find folks who pick 10 problems and stack them up, and they try to solve for all of them, but by doing that, they actually don't do what they're trying to do anymore, right? Very, very complex here. And then solutions. Once again, we all usually come into this idea with a solution that we've already created in our heads, in this narrative that we have. Solve this problem, that's a solution for it, I'm gonna stick with it because it's mine. And often the challenge is, when do we pivot our solutions to meet the real impact that we're trying to strive for? And when we think about the problem, we start there. Usually there are two things. It could be a long list of things, semester-long class, but I'm gonna narrow down to these two. You start with the impact you wanna have, and then you have to make a bunch of assumptions about that, the problem. So let me just ask real quick. Somebody have a problem that they think about on a day-to-day basis and the impact somebody else's life they can try to solve tomorrow if they really have time for it? You know you already have one. Somebody else probably has one. Just raise your hand and just give me one real quickly. Yes? No nearby beauty supply stores. What assumptions are you making to say that's a real problem?
Personal experience.
Your personal experience, which is, I want to go buy something and there's nothing around me to go buy, right? You're also making an assumption that you're not the only one with that problem, right? Because if it was just you, it just sucks for you, right? But if you imagine there are a bunch of other people with the same problem, like, yes, maybe there's a venture here somewhere, right? What other assumptions might you be making about that?
That people don't have their own products, or have need products, I guess. Am I the only one who needs products? I don't know.
So people, not only do they want to solve a problem, but they want to solve it like now. Not wait until spring break when they go back home, right? Like now, to the point where they're gonna leave campus to go get it, right? Okay. You may also be assuming that people can afford the products, right? Usually when you start with a problem, you start making a bunch of assumptions, because those are, you have to test those at some point. I'll just leave that there for now, right? Usually problems is not just, oh, it's a big problem. Like, what assumptions am I making about this problem? Because then I need to test if these things will be real. And then we get to, we were gonna run an exercise about picking a problem. I'm not gonna do that right now, we just did one kind of, sort of. But I wanna get to solution fit. One of the first steps we probably should be taking, once we start thinking about solutions, what I recommend to folks is like, oh, I saw this problem and I have this solution, like, yeah, pause. Have you done any research to figure out what other solutions actually already exist in the marketplace before you start trying to solve the problem with your own solution? Oh, maybe else I could do this, but hey, show and tell. There is a entrepreneur in Baltimore. We carry this around as a market test, and afterwards, if you guys have feedback, let me know. This person is like, I like expensive handbags. When I go to a restaurant or an airport, I hate putting my handbags on the floor. So this person went out and invented a bag seat. And place your bag on top of it. That was their invention. And they're trying to sell that right now for like $54. Tell me your feedback later. So for the last 2 weeks, I've been carrying this thing around. Everywhere I go, hey, I have this thing, what are your thoughts? All right, I went home, my wife put it down, my staff put it down. They're like, isn't that what the hook thing on the table's for? That we already have? The hook is a lot.
Chair.
Right, the back of the chair. The hook, like, it's a lot smaller. All right, I can buy that online right now. And a bunch of different price points. Buy metallic, buy plastic. Why do I need a fancy thing for $80 or whatever, right? I'm sure somebody will buy this, right? But before this person went out, this person is a dear friend, like I love her to death, right? But before they went out and did this and invested a bunch of money to develop this, they did actually do this. Or did they say, I don't like the hooks. We did a different type of product. And that's a fair assumption too, right? And then you have to go and engage people who actually may have that problem, who actually may be on the other side of that problem, right? So in this particular case, where are all the people who like expensive handbags who don't want them to touch the floor? Did they talk to this person? Did this person go talk to them and say, here's a drawing of my idea before I go and put money into it? What do you think? I wonder if that process happened. I don't know. And how much would they be willing to pay for it? Because I don't know where the price point came. All I know is I'm not paying $40 for it. Right? Don't tell her I said that. But here's the thing. I use it on my bag. It was perfectly fine, actually. I'm not sure I'll pay $54 or whatever it was, but I don't mind actually carrying it around. My bag is pretty heavy, actually. And then often would tell folks, after you ask a bunch of questions, and then you go out and see what's out there in the field, and then you start talking to folks that you know in your own personal realm, that you believe will buy into this solution. You get feedback from them before you start launching anything, before you start moving further. Then you have to start coming up with some theories in your head of how this is going to play out, right? And often we then start looking at this idea of a theory of change model and a logic model. And I'll just show, there's plenty of, I grab these snapshots of the internet, there's plenty of resources here on this, so just go watch. There's plenty of YouTube videos, there's too much out there. So this is a very simple one, right? The problem is I'm always late to work. And what causes it usually? Traffic, leaving the house late, waking up late, can't decide what to wear in the morning. Now, what are some root causes of that, of the causes themselves? Well, if I'm going to bed late because I'm staying up watching Netflix, or I can't fall asleep and I'm drinking coffee all day long, right? Because some people just stop here, right? I'm waking up late. I need to solve that problem. Let's buy 3 alarms instead of 1, right? We start trying to solve the problem or the cause we see on a day-to-day basis, the most tangible, without going one level down and say, no, what's the deeper root, right? And then we should come up to a theory of change, which usually looks like an if-then statement. So I have a problem, and then I say, well, if I set a bedtime and stop watching Netflix, and if I reduce my coffee intake daily, if I go to bed earlier, I can go to bed earlier as a result, and then can wake up earlier, and then prepare for my outfit the night before, then perhaps I can leave. Then I can leave the house on time, take a different route to work, and I get to work on time. It's not this complex, right? If that's in what you just said, if there were a beauty supply store literally half a mile away from campus, then I could convince a bunch of other students at UMBC to go shop there. Therefore, it's a solid business, right? Which just prioritizes convenience, proximity to solve the problem. But you have to come up with these statements and say, okay, what is it that I'm trying to solve for? So that if I do this, then this will happen. It gets a lot more granular than that, but usually we start off with that high level statement. And then if the logic model kind of forces you to go into it a little bit more, because we talk about what resources and inputs do you need to actually do the thing. In your case, do you have money to pay rent for a store? Right? Do you know who's gonna work the store? Do you actually have time to run a business? Right? What are the inputs that you have to put into this thing? And then what are the activities that you must take on? Not just the inputs anymore. What activities do you have to take on? Right? You have to buy inventory, right? You have to make sure is marketing happening, right? Social media, telling people. You have to make sure you know how to set prices, right? And then if so, what will happen as a result, output? In your case, primarily, people are actually buying something, right? And it's proven that it's working. Sales. And then longer term outcomes It's a lot more fly people around campus because they got access to all the stuff that they need right next door. You can take this and run it through any idea or any problem you're thinking of right now. And we can't skip any of these things. Because sometimes we start with activities. A lot of us entrepreneurs start with activities. Well, I was already doing this thing. I could just turn it into a business, right? Without really calculating all the things that it actually takes to do it. Right? And then we start asking people, what's the cost of doing the thing? I don't really know, I just do it. Are you paying yourself? Oh, if I make money, I pay myself. But if you were an employee and calculating your time, what does it actually take for you to run a business? I don't know. Can you keep a diary? Yeah. And you keep a diary, and then 3 months later, whoa, I am so going broke, I don't even know it, right? Because I'm spending so much time that I'm not accounting for to do the thing, because we're not being mindful of this part. Most businesses, quite frankly, they can stop here. Output. Facebook says how many ads you clicking on per hour when you're on the app, right? That's the output. Turns to economic gain right away. On the social venture side, you're making an argument that the output of today is going to contribute to some much greater outcome in the future. The kid is now getting better grades, perhaps is more likely not to go to jail. That longer term outcome is what you're working for. But what you can count today is not that. It's the day-to-day things you can measure. And often this is a difference between a social venture and just a regular business. It's this focus on the future outcome that you can't measure right away. Because that's where society shifts, right? Not here. All right, I'll move on from this, but often when we talk about solutions, you want to make sure they're packaged in a way, because quite frankly, what this allows you to do is then go out and test a bunch of assumptions. Not only the initial assumptions, test that this makes sense, test that what you're doing is actually working, because this is where when you go to a store or you get a service, they give you a customer satisfaction survey right away to see if it's working. That's testing here. Longitudinal studies, test here. And then the idea of, okay, this was supposed to be another activity, but I'm recognizing that time may not be on our side, so I'm gonna skip this part. And then we move on to this idea of testing your solution sets, right? So when you actually have landed on a solution, or a couple of solutions that you wanna run against each other, you gotta go out and test it. You've been in a laboratory the entire time, right? Ideally, most entrepreneurship does not start that way. This is textbook stuff, let me be very clear about that. Most folks stumble their way into entrepreneurship. They have been doing it. Now they're trying to reorganize, but while still doing it. And then we call that working on the business while in the business, which is the craziest thing ever. Or building the plane as you fly it. We have all this terminology to describe it. But if you were in a laboratory doing this step by step, that's what I'm talking about. But now, the idea of testing your solutions. There are steps for that too. This is not like all encompassing, but one thing we talk about often is the idea of customer discovery. And often, customer discovery can take many forms. You can say, all right, I got my assumptions down, right? Including the inputs and the outputs and the outcomes, long-term outcomes, and the resources. What if I were to create a survey, right, about this unique salon or beauty supply store, right? And before I actually go launch a store, what if I actually just execute a survey around campus and get 500 people to respond to it and ask a bunch of questions and incentivize them to do that, and says, which hours operating would most likely work for you, right? And give them 3 options, right? What's too far to leave campus for to make it worth your time? What type of products would you want? You want variety in labels, or just the basic of each thing, right? You can actually execute a survey, get information before you start investing money into the thing itself. Usually we call that the prototype or the pilot phase, maybe early information gathering, but that also can be coupled with a low cost miniature solution of the thing that you can test out and collect more data that way. So an example in your case would be, instead of paying rent right away, what if I just get a mobile cart? I just ride around campus and set it somewhere and tell people, come to the cart. That cart doesn't cost me a whole lot of money, right? I get the people give you things on survey, and then you say, well, it's here. And they're like, oh yeah, the survey was a year ago, some things changed, right? A good way to test it out is this cart. I just made it up, but it sounds about nice to have cart on campus with products on it, right? Or a vending machine with products on it, on campus. And if you see the activity keep going, I'm like, now I need a store. Keeps your cost contained, your energy contained in a way that is measurable. And then we talk about customer validation as another key part of that process, which is really what information are we gathering while we are out discovering from the customers that will help us really figure out this thing is real or not. And there's a bunch of things you collect data on: pricing, your core products and service mix. We talk about like, what is your core product? What is people going to know you for? And then what's the add-ons, right? When I go to a restaurant, the core product supposedly is food. But you know what they make most of their money from? Alcohol, right? But they don't advertise that part, right? They advertise the food. The food is the core product, right? But from a revenue standpoint, most restaurants don't survive on food alone. So they have to have the mix, right? Do you have the right mix in place? And often we talk about this idea of the reason for adoption or not adoption. Understand from your customer, why would they actually support this thing, or the reasons they may not. Even if it's only a half a mile away, it's still off campus. I'm so busy, right? Once you're providing me a delivery service, I don't have time, even if it was right there, right? That's a big reason for non-adoption. I'm too busy, even though I know I need a thing. Does that make sense? Or it's just too expensive. I can't do it. And then you say, well, if it's too expensive, doesn't mean you can't do it, it just means I need to find a way to subsidize it for you. So how much would you be willing to pay? What if this person pays this much and you pay this much and our average out is here? So a non-adoption reason is not a reason not to do it, it's just a reason to maybe adjust something. But a lot of folks go out looking for confirmation bias. We go out to confirm the reason for adoption, right? So we can tell ourselves that this thing is good. We're not asking the tough questions for this, because ultimately, 5 people doing it don't mean it's sustainable. You need a lot more people to do it for it to be sustainable. Which goes back again to that financial sustainability part of that wheel, right? You need volume to some extent. And this is important, figuring out how to unlock that volume equation. I should pause. Any questions for now? All right, I'll keep going. So this is just a graphic that kind of maps out this whole idea of custom discovery and validation. I'm Xing out these two for a reason, and I'll tell you why. On this side, we talk about custom discovery. So really trying to figure out the problem and the solutions that I'm trying to put out in the world, and is there really a fit? You know fit when you can, that solution works over and over again, right? All of a sudden, students stop attending universities. There's a big problem solution fit equation imbalance, right? If people stop going to basketball games, that solution that worked for a really, really long time is no longer solving the problem. It's need for entertainment, right? It's something we have to constantly monitor. It's not just a one-time thing at the beginning, because habits shift, people's perceptions shift. This is something we should always be mindful of. This is why customer discovery is always a continuous process. It never stops. Knowing your customers and the reasons they come back or don't come back, it's probably one of the best things you can do to have a successful venture. Your proposed MVP stands for minimum viable product. In this case, the MVP is the cart, not the store. What is the lowest form of this thing I can do that is the most cost contained to try it out before I go do the big thing, right? And often you want to think about, what is the MVP that I can do right now and test it out? And then prove that that will work before I go to the next thing. And then we always talk about proposed funnels to like get into the broader market. And then in the customer validation phase, we're now looking for product market fit, not problem solution fit anymore. Product market fit, are there enough people that will pay or use the thing to justify its existence? Another process that you continue to flow through. And then eventually there starts to become bigger question about business model. So a business model, and I'll mention something else in a second, then goes to all the things you would think about, like, am I charging enough? Am I charging too much? What capacity does it take to do this thing? Is it just me? Do I have to hire more people? Because when I start hiring people, profit margins are getting thinner and thinner, right? You gotta figure that part out. What technology solutions do I need? Right? So a lot of other things, when you start getting to, like, this is a real business now, and there are enough people coming back over and over again, you start having problems with growth. How do you grow it in a way that doesn't burn you, essentially? And then part of that also is the sales marketing roadmap. How do you get more people to adopt the thing over time in a way that is sustainable, once again? And I will say, in a traditional business, apps, in the technology world, this is just a process people just run through all the time. Companies form, a year later they're gone because they never could get over this hump. And we've just sunk like $10 million of venture capital money into it just to be like, oh, sorry, it didn't work, and on to the next one. In social ventures, the problem is you've made commitments to a community, to a person. You can't just say, oh, it didn't work, we'll try the next one. Oh, it didn't work, we'll try the next one. People are hurt in that process. So you have to take it a little more seriously when you go into this realm, all right? I'll come back to the second two later, but this says pivot. This rapid adaptation in this cycle often is where, usually in the more for-profit technology, we'll call it the valley of death. If you don't figure this out fast enough and how this cycle goes back and forth with each other, failure is pending. All right? Because when you get this done, that's when you kind of start thinking about, okay, how do we scale? But to get there, there's a number of questions you gotta ask yourself first. Because when you get here, that's why you start pouring big money in. Any questions about that? I think there's one more thing I wanted to point out here before I move on to the next section. Yes, the marketing mix. I teach a whole class on this stuff, so a whole course, so let me just start rolling it down to just 2 minutes here. Often when we think about the business model, the marketing mix is a significant component of it that we think about. And it's the 4 Ps: place, product, price, and promotion. This is really your relationship with your customer at this point. All right? This is the part you have to figure out sooner rather than later. 1, what is the product? Once again, is there a core product? Are there other products or services around that you need to offer, right? Because this thing also can shift and can be refined. Doesn't mean that if something doesn't work, you just toss it away. It's just what small tweaks do I need to make, right? I don't know why this is $54 or whatever it is, but if somebody tells me, Jay, actually I could use that thing, the price is too high. Then you say, it's not a problem with the product. You just gotta figure out, what about this product is driving the cost so much? Are there tweaks I can make to it to bring the price down, to still make it a useful product? Does that make sense? That's what it looks like to do product refinement or service refinement. Price, important. Gotta set the price right. The challenging part for social ventures, who's paying? Especially when the folks you're serving don't have a whole lot of money. There's a framework that we use that I'm not necessarily the most fond of, but it is what it is. This idea of a beneficiary versus a customer. The customer pays, the beneficiary benefits. Sometimes they're the same person, sometimes they're not. So if I go to the state of Maryland and I write a proposal for the state to give me a contract to provide mental health counseling services to a community in West Baltimore, That community in West Baltimore is not paying anything. They're the beneficiary. The customer is the state of Maryland, right? It makes it a little more complex because now you're worried about two key stakeholders every single day. How do I keep you happy enough to keep giving me the contract? And how do I keep you happy enough to tell me this is actually worth doing? It makes things a little more complex. In traditional business, the customer is the beneficiary. Your feedback comes from the same person, always. In a social venture, there's often more than one or two stakeholders. You gotta find a way to keep them all happy. It's the foundation who's giving you a grant, and then you got a contract with this person. And then this person is paying full price. This person is paying below full price, because they get the discount, because they don't have as much money. Pricing mix, right? Now you have a bunch of different customers you gotta worry, okay, this goes out of balance, we're screwed. That's the challenge of managing a social venture, is figuring out this piece, because it gets very tricky, very fast. My organization, we serve about 150 entrepreneurs every day. And more keep knocking on the door. And folks are like, well, are you gonna just get more grants? Like, where are you gonna find more grants to like get more people to do the work? I'm like, yeah, I don't know either. Because all the entrepreneurs we're working with are also going to the same people for the grants. And it's like, well, okay, start charging them maybe. I'm like, how much am I really gonna charge an entrepreneur? It's gonna be sufficient enough to make it worth it, right? That gets really complex with that. So this is something to keep an eye on. And then promotion really is the idea of, how do they hear about us? Marketing, traditional marketing, right? How are they gonna know where to find me? And there's a cost to that too, right? Am I doing TV ads? Am I just putting flyers in those doors? Am I just gonna go out and stand on the side of the road with a big sign, right? Where am I gonna meet the people that are supposed to use my product? And keep in mind, your promotion strategy may also split between the customer and the beneficiary. The beneficiary, you have to go meet where they are. And then you gotta go build another engine to meet the customer who's paying where they are. So then you got the grant writer writing grants, you got the contract person pursuing contracts, then you got the person delivering the program, talking to the person who's actually benefiting. And that's all infrastructure that you're building that's gonna cost you money. Back to financial sustainability again. And then place is how are you gonna deliver the thing? And for some folks, the place is, I have to go into the community to do the work. Now, what does that mean for the work? For some folks, it's all virtual. Now you have to worry about, well, the folks I'm trying to serve, do they have access to the virtual thing? Right? Number of other things to be mindful of when you think about place. What is the best way to deliver the thing to minimize barrier and access challenges? A lot in the developing world, globally, this often is used as like the last mile in distribution. A lot of governments, a lot of large institutions will come up with these solutions. And those solutions will primarily benefit those who have access. And then the last mile of distribution is usually left behind. Right? Imagine a government saying we're gonna give farming subsidies to farmers to help stimulate agricultural growth for the country, make sure we have food to eat. If you are a corporation that's running a bunch of farms across the country, you have access to that information right away. My grandmother in a remote village in Nigeria does not have access to that information. That is the last mile. And if you're truly about economic development from a place of reaching those who need it the most, that then puts another strain on your strategy. But you gotta figure out how to get there. If you're truly gonna have the impact you want, right? That last mile distribution problem is big for a lot of social enterprises. Now, often you have a lot of social enterprises spin up to solve just the last mile problem. They don't try to do everything else. Like, I'm just here for the last mile. And now they're competing with everyone else that's not before the last mile, who have a lot more resources, and now that's who you're competing with for contracts. And you don't have as much resource because the last mile can't really pay you a whole lot. Another big thing to be mindful of is this mix right here, because this is where your budget and financial sustainability can drain you really, really fast. Let me check time here. All right. I'm going to speed up a little bit. Once again, back to understanding your costs. I don't really like this graphic, but it goes back to what we just talked about. What's the cost to do the thing? When you're producing a good, like a product, we say what's the cost of goods sold? In this case, it's materials, it's the people who actually develop the product, it's the entrepreneur didn't do it, right? It's inventory to buy and hold somewhere. It's a rent where you're holding the thing, right? In the service world, it looks a little bit different. It's the people that you're hiring to deliver the service. It's a big part of your cost. So be mindful of those things, because the true cost is going to tell you this is financially sustainable or not. So you're not setting up people for failure by making promises you can't keep. And then I'm going to wrap up the part nobody wants to talk about often, money. How do you find the money to do the thing? And often in money, we talk about it in two different ways. How you gonna make money, and how you gonna finance this thing to get to the place where you need to make money to begin with. This is a quick chart that says social enterprises find themselves in the middle of this bucket. Traditional charity is where most nonprofits will sit. I am in this bucket right now, but I support a bunch of people in this bucket. I go out, I raise charitable dollars from foundations, individuals, families, people who have money, convince them that my mission is great, and they're gonna give me some money to do that mission because it's benefiting all these people. These folks over here are trying to make a blended, can you give me a small grant? So I can then go help sell the thing? So I can survive in the middle? More complex. Over here, it's just, I'm just gonna sell as much as possible, and if it's not selling, shut it down, stop anything. This is a weird place to be. You have to think about what is going to be your model and how you survive from a revenue standpoint. Because if you can't charge full price for a lot of things you do, then some subsidy has to help you fix it. And often that subsidy is coming from this side of the house. You ain't got to worry about getting money from both sides of the house. All right? And then we'll talk about financing. And usually this is the where do I find money to do the thing, right? Especially if you can't make money right away. Please don't, I can send you this, it's too much. All I'm simply saying is most folks, when they think about where to find money to run a business or a social venture, we jump into two buckets right away. Banks and venture capital. The two least friendliest sources of capital for anything social related. Banks are worried about making their money back with interest. Venture capital is about you making as much possible profit as possible and getting out of the way for the next one, and minimize as much social impact. I don't care. Just make me the money and call. There are some nice ones out there, but generally speaking, the models are about profit maximization. Now there's a good, healthy amount of tools to help think through that can help you stay out of trouble and not take bad money. That forces the mission out the picture. That's what often happens, right? When you start being under pressure all the time to pay a loan back with high interest rate, or a venture capital is saying, when is the money coming? When is the money coming? Usually what happens is your mission goes out the window. Your focus shifts to money instead of staying on impact. So there's a bunch of different things here. I can send this once again as a description, and things to consider about why you would take that type of money or not. And then I do have another slide that kind of lists the Baltimore ecosystem, who some of the typical players are in any of these particular types of capital. So you have that too. If you're in a tech space, right, and you want to do something venture related, but also the social mission, TechCo's great. It's state money, part of an agency to help build tech companies in Maryland, right? They typically are friendly as long as they know you can scale. Foundations are good for grants, but a lot of people want grants, so they're oversubscribed with not enough money to play around with. So you better have something that's really, really compelling to get their attention. There are a good number of university-based funding sources. Maryland Venture Fund is part of Maryland Momentum Fund, and it's actually a fund available to alumni or students of University System of Maryland's universities. Yes?
Is it okay if I take a picture of it?
Yeah, I can send this to you guys too. I'll send it to you.
Sure, great.
So there are a number of resources that exist. Just gotta go out and dig and figure out what works best for you and take the first step. But nothing is gonna beat, I will say this now, sweat equity. how much of your time and labor you put in because you love it so much. All right? And then often when you're looking for money, you want to be mindful of a number of things, and I'll wind down. The stage you are in, sometimes you're just too early for money. It's just what it is. Folks need you to put your time in, build that theory of change, build that impact model, go out and test it, make sure it's real before you start looking for money. Now, if you're sitting in a laboratory on campus or in a tech lab, and you have this new way, you just re-envision how society's gonna shift, people will come give you the money before you even walk out the door, right? Just a matter of difference. You know, you play space was scalable, means how much money you're looking to try to, can you make? Some people care about that. Your impact orientation, somebody's gonna care about. Your organizational structure does matter to some extent, and how much traction, essentially how much activity you built before you start looking for money also matters. I think this is the last slide. And don't take a picture, they're all over the internet. I usually tell people, this is a basic business model canvas, but for social ventures. Because what it has in here is, what are you gonna do with your surplus? If you have revenue, what are you gonna do with it? Think about it up front. You're gonna reinvest in what? Hire more people, right? Increase wages, so people that are working for you actually get paid a decent wage. And it does talk about impacts that should be in here somewhere. Your impact measures. How are you gonna measure your impact down the line? Most business model canvases don't have this, but the ones that are creative for social ventures do have them. And the idea is to jot down the basic notes that you have in any of these categories to help you see the full picture in one shot. It's very helpful. And then the last slide kind of talks about this piece. This is usually a few years out, but it's something that can keep you moving, right? What would it look like if I get to a place where I can scale this thing, right? Sometimes we get so caught up in this, we start losing sight of the broader vision of what is possible. That's my fault. That's me every day. I have to be reminded of the vision, what is possible, to motivate me to keep doing this part.
Jay, thank you so much. That was so substantive.